Hi, my name is Rhiannon Butler, and I'm here today with London dating expert Hayley Quinn. Who is this amazing woman? Well, for starters, she is a well-known dating coach and writer, and has been featured in Cosmopolitan, FHM, Now, Zoo, New Idea, and AskMen.com. Hayley has taught thousands of men and women how to date through her talks, seminars, and private instructions. She specialises in teaching conversation, persuasion, and seduction skills. She also loves writing flirty text messages for her clients and eating peanut butter. 365dates is lucky to have her as an expert on the London dating scene, and perhaps give us some ideas of what to expect from 365dates' elusive Ms.London. Hayley, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Oh, no, it's great. It's great to finally catch up with you.
My first question is, how do you think dating in London differs from, say, New York?
Oh, okay. I would say, first of all, New York people tend to be a lot more proactive, particularly the men. When I lived there, I couldn't sit in a coffee shop without being asked out on a date, which was kind of flattering. So in that respect, I think the men are more proactive. I also think, though, that the London dating scene is becoming much more like the New York dating scene. I think traditionally English people used to have a mindset where if you went on one or two dates with someone, suddenly you were in a committed relationship and it was going somewhere. And I actually think now it's much more like New York, where people will date multiple people at the same time. And then, you know, if one breaks through, that's great. But I think actually people are quite reticent to commit, and they take longer to commit in London, which is much more similar to New York and much different to lots of places like smaller towns or other areas of the world.
Do guys ask you on a date then in London? Is that the changing that you're talking about, or is it still a blurred line of hanging out?
Yeah, I think it's still a blurred line of hanging out. I don't actually think London guys are particularly brilliant at asking women on dates. I think New York guys are. I think I actually play a game with a very gorgeous friend of mine who's a catwalk model. And we will sit up at a bar, you know, dressed up really nicely. We'll look around and we'll smile at people, and we've been timing to see how long it is before a man approaches us. And so far we've gone for like 2.5 months, and we haven't had one approach yet. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Either we're really hideous, or basically London men, you know, they'll be good at doing dating websites and maybe dating events like sort of like speed dating, but they're not very good at approaching a woman cold, which is where I try and help them.
Well, do they at least generally pay for the dates, or is the bill typically split?
I would say typically split, although that would maybe on the first date or two. Like if he's a wealthy guy, like we have lots of guys that work in the city, like the financial sector, you would probably expect them to pay, but the average British man probably not. And then the horrible thing is, as soon as you get into like the swing of things of having like more than one or two dates, then there'll be a greater expectation as you're going along to go Dutch.
Well, what is the best thing about dating English men?
Oh God, okay. This is not good for you. I'm having a huge pause. Well, I would say English people, generally, I think they're intelligent and sophisticated, especially in London. They generally are quite cultured and open-minded, and they are very sexy. Like, there's nothing that does it for me more than a good public schoolboy accent, actually. But I think in terms of being, you know, if you wanted a man that was, for instance, very emotional or very passionate or spontaneous, those aren't characteristics that are very much part of the British man's psyche. You know, I think that I'm trying to bring back a bit of romance in London, actually.
What do you think that the worst thing about Englishmen is?
I think they're not very proactive at all.
Okay.
I think in terms of the initial approach, that's one thing, but also when you're dating to them, I still think in England we have a bit of a stoical attitude, the stiff upper lip, where men maybe don't feel as confident sort of speaking about their feelings, and compared to men from, say, like Southern Europe or Latin America, who are much more passionate, will kind of turn up in the middle of the night with a bunch of flowers for you. Don't ever expect that from a British guy. They can have difficulty, because I think a lot of the time, and it's British women's fault as well, actually, because we have this idea that men don't have thoughts and feelings and emotions, and men are expected to not be particularly emotional. So I think they can be quite tough in terms of they expect being men for their role to be like kind of the strong silent type. So if you don't want the strong silent type, you could have problems in England.
I've heard that English men are actually rude. So is there some truth behind this then, or is that just them being tough?
I think they can be kind of no nonsense. I suppose that's fair to say. I think that they're not into flattering women particularly or over complimenting a woman. I think they're actually, if you want someone who's quite good, I suppose the real upside is they're very witty. They're good at teasing you and challenging you and having that amazing banter that keeps relationships electric. However, you know, I think you'd be more likely to get a tease from a British guy than a compliment. So in that sense, they are a little bit rude.
How does someone get typically picked up in London? Do Englishmen just offer to buy a girl a drink? You've touched on it before, but is it straightforward when they finally do approach you?
No, actually, I would say that British men are typically very indirect in that you'd expect them... I mean, buying you a drink at the bar, you'd be doing pretty well. I think they might ask you an inane question, like the directions to somewhere, or they might just try and start a conversation with you through whatever way they seem fit. And then they'll hope... Well, there's two categories. There's guys like that. They'll start a conversation with you and hope that it will just develop into something. Or they'll... or they'll be the kind of player that will go out. I would say, we have quite a culture of drinking heavily here, so people go out and get very drunk and then sort of drunkenly kiss someone, or people will be on dating websites. They're very, very popular in the UK. What's less likely is, though I'm actually part of a movement to change this, is that a man would just walk up to you on the street or in a bar and say, hey, I think you're really attractive. I'd love to get to know you. British guys would very, very rarely do that. So I think you have to, like a lot of the time, I think if a guy is speaking to you when he doesn't necessarily need to speak to you, he's probably trying to hit on you. He just might not be doing it in the most effective way.
Fill us in. Do English men make good lovers?
I would say yes, actually. I think it's partly because they're kind of because maybe they're so stoical and slightly reserved on the outside. I think actually they can probably be some of the most like adventurous, wild lovers that you get internationally. You need one upside, don't you? If they're not going to come up and speak to you, and you're going to have to split the bill. That's at the end of it.
This is true. And also, my next question, I think you touched on it before, and the answer was no, but I'll ask it again anyway. In general, are the English a fan of romance and love? And could you be taken on a romantic getaway, or do you have to get to know them for the emotions to easily be seen?
I think some men are just more prone to being romantic than others. I think that a romantic getaway is definitely something that's what we'd say is a mini break, and if you're into mini break territory, then you're more than likely you're in a committed relationship en route to marriage. So it's not something you would expect necessarily to get as part of a... I've had a couple of really amazing dates with millionaires, but apart from that, typically it's very standard, the courting ritual. You go for drinks and then for dinner, and you wouldn't necessarily expect any kind of outlandish romantic gestures. Although saying that, I do think that in England we do have a history and a tradition of romance, everything from Shakespeare onwards. Like we have a rich kind of literary and art tradition of those things. And so I think actually sometimes British women trip up, because myself included, because we have this romantic vision in our heads of how things are supposed to go, because culturally we're so focused on perfect romances. And yet the reality, I think, in London and in England is quite different. And I think that it could be good for people to be okay to make more kind of romantic gestures. I mean, in England, for instance, if you're on a tube or anywhere in a public place, it's not, culturally normal to start a conversation with a stranger. And in that respect, it's not culturally normal either for a man to make maybe a really outlandish romantic gesture to a woman he doesn't know. So I think maybe at heart in England, we all want to be these amazing romantics, and we have this idea of what we'd like to be like. However, I think due to kind of some annoying cultural and social conventions, maybe we don't quite live up to what we aspire to be like.
What is the one piece of advice that you would give to Ms. London about tackling a 365 dates datathon?
I would say, oh, one piece is hard. I would say that she needs to be proactive. I think she needs to be able to go out and know what she wants and be okay with being kind of a bit of a modern woman and going for it. I think that in terms of getting all of those 100 dates, I would say join dating websites, ask your friends for blind dates, put the word out there, because men, though probably loads of men would love to go on a date with Miss London. If she's the wonderful woman she's going to be, then they're probably going to be afraid to instigate it. So I think she's going to have to take the course of her future in her own hands. And also, I suppose, as a cautionary tale, the London dating scene is a lot like the New York dating scene now, and that it's become quite ferocious because it's such a cosmopolitan city, because we have so much anonymity, because there's so much choice. People tend to date around heavily before they'll commit to anyone. And so I think that maybe having 100 dates is the perfect thing for her, because it'll stop her being too attached for someone too soon until they prove that they're this wonderful man that's deserving of her.
Like a knight in shining armour.
Yeah, I would love the knight in shining armour in England, believe me. Like, I am waiting. I'm looking down my street right now on this interview thinking, God, he's got to be here sometime.
He probably just got too lost and is too stubborn to ask for directions.
Yeah, exactly. I knew that tube line was out today, and I'm sure he's like, he'll be here in a second. Yeah.
Thank you for your advice. Your insight has been really valuable in understanding the finer details of London and dating in London. Our very own Miss London is going to have an amazing adventure ahead of her. Well, thank you, Hayley.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to Miss London.